There is a long history of labor relations between the United States and Mexico. In 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act stopped immigration from China, and Mexican men were recruited to work the railroads. The implication of this labor exchange were growing prejudices and racism toward Mexicans. Following the Great Depression in the 1920s, U.S. Americans and Mexicans were competing for agricultural jobs, which caused even more friction between the two countries. In the 1930s, a Mexican repatriation occurred, where Mexicans were forced or pressured to leave the United States. This left a significant large shortage when World War II began. In response to this shortage, President Roosevelt enacted the Bracero Program in 1942 for the importation of temporary contract laborers from Mexico to the U.S. Even after the war ended, U.S. employers continued to request extensions of the Bracero programs until it officially ended in 1964 due to the growing objections from American labor interests. After the Bracero program ends, the Mexican government sets up the Border Industrialization Program, otherwise known as the Maquiladora Program. Maquiladoras became more visible to U.S. Americans in 1994 when the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA. More U.S. companies decided to take advantage of the tax breaks and cheap labor and move their businesses to the U.S.-Mexico border. Where the Bracero programs was typically for Mexican men, the Maquiladora program predominantly employs young Mexican women. Where are your goods made? Who makes them? And what are their lives like? Many consumers do not acknowledge the factors of production and the implication it has on others. In the maquiladoras along the U.S. and Mexico border, the maquila employees hardly scrape by on their meager wages and typically have a longer work week than the average U.S. employee. Workers are exposed to many chemicals and health hazards while working that affect them and their families. Maquila workers can develop back problems, carpal tunnel syndrome, asthma, disabling allergic reactions, as well as increased miscarriages and birth defects. The environmental impact of the factories is apparent in the maquila shanty towns, where waste runoffs and toxins are dumped and left to contaminate the landscape and the people of Mexico. Women working in the maquilas are subjected to unsafe work environments socially, as 1 out of 5 workers are victims of sexual harassment not only by supervisors and managers but also by their male co-workers. They are also subjugated to the use of pregnancy tests in the workplace in order to avoid employing pregnant women and deter already employed women from becoming pregnant. The unsafe social settings of the maquilas are ingrained into its work culture, expecting female workers to comply with whatever their wishes are, because the alternatives are unemployment. This quality of job is not something any human should be subjected to without proper health precautions, let alone the quality of life that maquilas subject the surrounding environment and people to unwillingly. Workers are left with no upward mobility or external opportunities due to race-to-the-bottom tactics of globalization, and has no means of escaping it with the meager wages afforded to them. These workers are underpaid, overworked, harassed, and exposed to toxins, and while they are supporting a thriving industry, the industry itself has no interest in the health or long-term effects it has on its employees. Many organizations are making a difference on the U.S.-Mexico border by educating and organizing workers around labor rights. Speaking about the impact of free trade and providing a safe zone to talk about gender and violence against women is one of their focuses, and promoting economic self-sufficiency and fair trade. These organizations use many types of empowerment. Some express themselves through art, while others use support groups to reach solidarity through collaboration and activism. Artists and co-ops are using the internet to sell goods produced by former maquila workers under a fair wage label. Environmental youth groups work on a clean air campaign that tackles pollution brought in by commercial truck traffic. They work in collaboration with the Environmental Health Coalition from California. Workshops teach awareness through comic strips, murals, photography, and media to engage youth. As consumers, we must be aware that industries maximize profits by moving to locations with lower environmental regulations and workers' rights. Buying fair trade and union-made products supports good labor practices and shows your discontent with how free trade uses harmful chemicals and practices that hurt and disrespect the environment and all its inhabitants. Buying fair trade empowers women and their families. The Fair Labor Association was created to mask worker abuses. Adidas, American Eagle, Apple, and Nike are branded under the FLA, which is critiqued for having corrupt funding and potential conflict of interest. On campus, you can build solidarity about garment workers and their rights. Start a campaign at UTSA and demand fair wages for workers and fair traded goods at school shops. Be involved, spread awareness, and take control.